Good morning students. In today's class we will study the structure of monocot embryo. In our previous classes we have studied embryogenesis, the structure of dicot embryo, and today's class we will study in detail the structure of monocot embryo. You know the difference between a dicot and monocot. Dicot has two cotyledons whereas monocot has a single cotyledon. You can, when I draw the diagram, you can compare the diagram with the dicot embryo which was drawn in the previous class. Okay, so in an outline, the monocot embryo appears like this. Okay, as the name itself indicates, it has monocot, that means a single cotyledon. Okay, and where is the cotyledon? This part, if you see, of the embryo, this part of the embryo is known as cotyledon, whereas the other part, okay, the rest of the part is known as embryonal axis. We have already discussed that in an embryo, generally we find two parts. One is cotyledon, the second one is embryonal axis. Okay. While studying the structure of dicot embryo, there also I had shown you the two cotyledons and embryonal axis. Similar way, in this monocot embryo also we have cotyledon, but the difference is here we have only one cotyledon compared to two cotyledons of dicot embryo, and we have an embryonal axis. This part of the embryo is nothing but it's a cotyledon. However, in monocots, generally the cotyledon is referred as scutellum. Okay, so this part of the embryo is referred as scutellum, which refers to a cotyledon. Okay, it has only one cotyledon, and the cotyledon in generally in monocots, it is referred as scutellum. Okay, now this is the cotyledon, whereas the other part of the embryo is referred as embryonal axis. Okay, here scutellum, when you compare to this embryonal axis, it is present to the lateral side of the embryonal axis. Okay, if you see this part is embryonal axis, scutellum is present on the lateral side of the embryonal axis. Okay, now here you can see a small outgrowth in this region of the embryo. This part is referred as epiblast. This part of the embryo is referred as epiblast. What are epiblast? They are the remnants of a cotyledon. Okay, imagine a cotyledon was about to arise in this particular place, in this particular region. However, since it is a monocot, the cotyledon stopped itself from growing. Okay, this part of the cotyledon stopped itself from growing into a new complete cotyledon. So this part of the embryo is referred as epiblast, which can also be referred as remnants of a cotyledon. That means the leftover part of a cotyledon. If given a chance, this epiblast could have developed into a new cotyledon. In that particular scenario, it would have become a dicotyledon. Since this is a monocotyledon, epiblast doesn't grow to form a new cotyledon. Okay, so this is the epiblast region of the embryo. Now in an embryo, while studying the dicot embryo itself, we have studied embryo should have two parts. Okay, one is plumule, another one is radicle. Okay, an embryo should always have embryonal axis always should have two regions. One is plumule, another one is radicle. What is a plumule? Plumule is nothing but shoot tip. Radicle is nothing but root tip. Okay. Plumule always give rise to a shoot, whereas radicle always gives rise to a root. Okay. It is a shoot tip or and radicle is a root tip. In this case of monocot embryo also, we have a shoot tip as well as a root tip. We have a plumule as well as a radicle. Plumule is always present at this part of the embryo. It is almost present here. It can also be referred as shoot apex. Okay, and this part is referred as plumule. Okay, whereas in this part here, in this part of the embryo, we have the structure known as radicle. Okay, so this gives rise to shoot tip and this gives rise to root tip in a developing plant. You all know embryo, it develops into a new plant. Okay, when embryo gives rise to a new plant, the plumule part gives rise to the shoot, whereas the radicle part gives rise to root. Okay. Now, while studying about the dicotyledon embryo, we have studied that there are two regions in an embryo known as epicotyle and hypocotyle. Epicotyle is a region which will be found above, epicotyle is a region of embryonal axis which is located above the attachment of cotyledons. Okay, above the level of cotyledons, the region attached is known as epicotyle. Now, this cotyledon or scutellum is attached to the embryonal axis at this particular region. If you look into this region, the scutellum, which is a cotyledon, is attached to the embryonal axis at this particular location. Okay, if I mark this location, the region of the embryonal axis above the location of the cotyledon or scutellum, this part, okay, this part of embryonal axis above the location or above the level of the cotyledon is known as epicotyle. This part of the embryonal axis is known as epicotyle, whereas the part of embryonal axis which is below the level of cotyledon is known as hypocotyle. So this whole region could be considered as hypocotyle. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. The part of the embryonal axis which lies above the location of or above the level of cotyledon. So this is the level of cotyledon because this is where the cotyledon has come and attached. Okay, cotyledon is present here. So this level is known as the level of cotyledon. Okay, so the region which is the region of the embryonal axis which is above the level of this cotyledon is known as epicotyle, and the region of embryonal axis which is below the level of these cotyledons are known as hypocotyle. Okay, so this bottom region is known as hypocotyle. Epicotyle always ends with plumule. We all know plumule is going to form a shoot in the future. Hypocotyle always ends with radicle, which is going to produce or form root in the future. Now, both plumule and radicle are covered by a undifferentiated sheath or a layer, okay, which will be present on both the sides of epicotyle and hypocotyle. I'll draw one by one here. if you see this region called as plumule is surrounded by, or it is surrounded by a undifferentiated sheath or a layer known as coleoptile. Okay, the plumule is covered by a undifferentiated sheath known as coleoptile. Here, this side of the embryo also, we have now. Before explaining you about that undifferentiated sheath in this hypocotyle region, let me draw one more structure here, which is known as root cap. As you all know, radical is going to give rise to root. Okay, so if the radical is going to give rise to root, there should be a structure known as root cap just below the radical. Just below the radical, we have the structure known as root cap. Okay. Now, below this root cap, in this region, we have a sheath known as coleorhiza. Okay, I told you there is an undifferentiated sheath both above plumule and surrounding to the radical and as well as plumule. This sheath is well developed and you can see it here clearly. This sheath is known as coleoptile. Whereas in this part of the hypocotyle, this coleorhiza, the undifferentiated sheath, is present. However, since it is undifferentiated, we are not drawing it we are drawing any particular structure to show the coleorhiza. We have to assume or imagine in our mind that it is an undifferentiated layer present here. It is known as coleorhiza. Okay, according to your NCERT syllabus also, if you look into the diagram, they have not drawn any particular structure to represent, say, your coleorhiza. However, you have to imagine that in this part, just below the root cap, enclosing these two structures known as radical and root cap, we have a sheath, undifferentiated sheath known as coleorhiza. Rhiza refers to root. So this part of this sheath always encloses a structure which develops into root. That is the reason it is called as rhiza. It's coleorhiza. Okay, now this part of the embryo, you have this structure called as coleoptile. Okay, this coleoptile encloses this plumule, whereas this undifferentiated sheath known as coleorhiza, it encloses radical as well as root caps. Okay, here we have few more structures. Okay, enclosed within the coleoptile, we have few more structures given as per your NCERT syllabus. Don't get confused with the plumule. They are nothing but they are some leaf primordia. Okay, they are the leaf primordia which will be enclosed within the coleoptile, because the leaf primordia is going to give rise to leaves in the future. It is in close association with the plumule. It is also enclosed within the coleoptile. Now this is the structure of a simple, this is the structure of a monocot embryo. The diagram looks little bit complicated. However, if you understand every part of the embryo, and if you know the structure in detail, it is very easy to draw the diagram. Initially you have to put an outline, then you have to draw plumule and radical, then surrounding to the radical you have to write a root cap, then you have to mention about coleoptile and coleorhiza. then you should know that this part of the embryo is epicotyle because it is above the level of the cotyledon, whereas this part of the embryonal axis is known as hypocotyle because it is below the level of cotyledons. Okay, so this is all about the structure of monocot embryo. If you look into your NCERT diagram, they have given the structure of monocot embryo something like this. However, this is just to clearly show the embryonal axis and all the structures. However, if you find it difficult to draw this type of structure, you can draw the initial structure what I had drawn, just representing coleoptile, coleorhiza, plumule, radicle, epiblast and scutellum. Okay, that would be more than enough. However, this is actually the ideal structure of monocot embryo, how they have given in your NCERT syllabus. Okay, I have explained all the structures belonging to a monocot embryo. I hope this structure is clear to you. Now you should know that from this embryo is present inside a monocot seed. Okay, this embryo is present inside a monocot seed because it's a monocot embryo. When given a proper favorable condition, this the seed germinates and this embryo gives rise to a new plant, whereas plumule will develop into shoot and the radicle will develop into root. Here in the violet color I have mentioned the leaf primordia's structures. There is nothing to get confused. I hope this diagram is clear to you. The next topic we will be dealing with is seed. Okay, after all these classes you should be now able to explain easily what is a seed. Okay, seed can be generally represented as a fertilized ovule. Seed can be represented as fertilized ovule because the ovule which is present inside the ovary of a pistil or carpel develops into seed once the fertilization is done inside the embryo sac. Okay, so the ovule is going to give rise to seed after the fertilization is done. The zygote develops into embryo, primary endosperm cell develops into endosperm tissue, the ovary develops into fruit, whereas the ovule develops into seed. The seed could be of two types, albuminous seeds and non-albuminous seeds. There are two types of seeds. One is albuminous seed, another type is non-albuminous seeds. Okay, the difference between albuminous and non-albuminous seeds are that the albuminous seeds have some amount of endosperm present inside the seed because the complete endosperm is not utilized by the developing embryo. I have mentioned while explaining embryo sac that in this part where the primary endosperm cell was present, they develop into endosperm. When the embryo is formed, this embryo is given nourishment or nutrition by this endosperm tissue. Okay, in few seeds what happens is that the developing embryo will consume all the endosperm tissue present inside the embryo sac. At that particular time when the seed is formed, there is no endosperm tissue inside the seed. Such seeds are known as non-albuminous seeds because there is no endosperm tissue remaining inside the seed. However, in few it will consume only partial endosperm, okay, for its development. This is the reason some part of endosperm will be remaining inside the embryo sac. So when the seed is formed, that endosperm tissue will be present inside the seed. Such seeds are known as albuminous seeds. Okay? So we can say albuminous seeds are those seeds which have residual endosperm. That means some part, small part of endosperm is present inside the seed because it is not fully utilized by the developing embryo. Okay, whereas in non-albuminous seed there is no residual endosperm. Endosperm is completely utilized by the developing embryo. Okay, so this is the difference between albuminous seeds and non-albuminous seeds. They have residual endosperm because it is not fully utilized by the developing embryo. Here, there is no residual endosperm inside the matured seed as it is completely utilized when the embryo was developing. Now, in few other cases, what happens is the nucellar cells. Hope you are aware of what are nucellar cells. Surrounding to the embryo sac, we have this group of cells known as nucellar cells or nucellus, what we say. So while explaining the formation of embryo sac, I have explained that one of the cells which is present towards the micropylar end in the nucellus tissue gets converted into a megaspore mother cell and they ultimately develop into this embryo sac. Okay. Now once the embryo sac is formed, the nucellar cells won't be present surrounding to the nucellar cells will be present when the embryo sacs are formed. However, when the seeds are formed after fertilization, when the seeds are formed, the nucellus tissue will not be present inside the seed in most of the seeds. However, few seeds will have these nucellar cells or nucellus inside the seed even after a seed is developing and a seed is maturing. Okay, if the nucellus is persistent, okay, if we find remnants of nucellus inside the seed, a developing seed, at that particular time we call such nucellar cells or nucellus as perisperm. Okay, when generally a seed is forming, nucellus will not be present inside the seed because seed is generally having three parts to it. One is seed coat, second one is cotyledon, third one is embryonal axis. These two are the parts of a embryo. Seed will have a seed coat apart from cotyledons and embryonal axis. Okay. Now, generally seed will not have nucellus inside it when they are growing, when they are formed. Only they will either have endosperm or they will not have endosperm. However, if the seed is carrying nucellar cells, okay, at that particular time, these nucellar cells are known as perisperm. We can say perisperm is present inside the seed. This is the general information about a seed. Now, we should know that when the seed is maturing, the water content which is present inside the seed keeps reducing. Okay, it reduces and the seed becomes very dry. Only when the seed gets proper water and favorable condition to germinate, it germinates and the embryo which is present inside the seed gives rise to a new plant. When the seed is in a dry condition, the embryo which is present inside the seed will be in a condition of dormancy. Okay, that means it is not active. Okay, when the seed gets favorable condition at that particular time, the embryo starts germinating and it starts producing a new plant. Now, we all know that inside the ovule, we will have a small opening known as micropyle. We have studied it in all our classes. Okay, if you study the structure of ovule, there will be a small opening known as micropyle. This opening is known as micropyle. Okay, even after the ovule is converted into a seed, the whole ovule will be converted into a seed. Okay, imagine this is a seed. What happens is micropyle converts into a small pore in the seed coat. Okay, so when the ovule it develops into a seed, the micropyle, which is a small pore or opening towards the micropylar end, this end, the micropyle develops into a small pore which will be present on the seed coat. What is a seed coat? Outermost layer of a seed. Okay, whatever seed you take, the outermost layer that you touch is known as the seed coat. Only once you open the seed coat of a seed, you will be able to find these two parts known as cotyledons and embryonal axis. Okay, and I mentioned about seed coat. This is the outermost layer of a seed. Where is it coming from? How a seed coat is formed? Okay, if you touch and feel any seed, the seed coat is always tough or it is kind of, it is hard. Which structure forms the seed coat? Now, while studying the structure of anatropous ovule, I have told you that any anatropous ovule generally have these outer layers, okay, known as integuments. Okay, there are two integuments, outer integuments and inner integument. There will be two layers. These integuments are the structure which gives rise to seed coat when the whole ovule is developing into a seed coat. Okay, imagine the whole ovule is developing into a seed. These outer layer, which are known as integument, forms the seed coat. So this is the seed coat formed from integument, and the whole seed is formed from ovule, and the small pore which you find in the seed coat is the micropyle. Okay, why micropyle is required? Why the small pore is required in a seed? Micropyle allows the entry of oxygen and water inside the seed. Only when the oxygen and water enter the seed, at that particular time, the seed will be able to germinate to give rise to a new plant. Okay, so this is the general structure of a seed. Here I have drawn a typical maize have drawn the structure of a maize seed, which is a monocot seed. So the name itself indicates this seed inside it will be having a single cotyledon. Okay, because it is a monocot. This is the structure of a just the outline of a maize seed. As you all know, the outermost part of a seed will be seed coat formed from integuments, both outer and inner integuments. And this part of the seed is known as endosperm. Okay, if you look into the seed, almost 50% of the seed is covered by endosperm. So what do we call it as? We call it as albuminous or non-albuminous. We call them as albuminous seeds because they have residual endosperm. Okay, inside the seed still there is some amount of endosperm. This is the reason we call the seed as albuminous seed. So a maize seed can be called as an albuminous seed because it has residual endosperm still present inside a seed. Now this part is endosperm. This part, which looks like a shield, this part of the seed is known as scutellum. Scutellum, as I already told you, it's a name used for cotyledons in monocots. So this part is scutellum. So I told you seed has three parts: seed coat, cotyledon and embryonal axis. We have a seed coat, we have cotyledons because that is the scutellum is nothing but a cotyledon, and they have a embryonal axis. Where is the embryonal axis? We will study it. Now do you see this yellow color layer which I have drawn here? This layer is known as alluron layer. Alluron layer is the outermost layer of the endosperm. This is a layer surrounding to this endosperm which is present inside it. Okay, now you have alluron layer which is the outermost layer of the endosperm. Now here you have a cotyledon known as scutellum. Where is the embryonal axis? Now as you all know, embryonal axis should have both plumule and radicle, root tip and the shoot tip. Here we have the radicle, which is root tip. We have plumule, which is the shoot tip. Surrounding to this plumule we have few leaf primordia. Okay. Lastly we have this. Covering sheath. In this part, which is the epicotyle part, we call them as coleoptile, and in the bottom portion of the embryo we call them as coleorhiza. So 6 terms that should be always remembered while drawing the structure of embryo are plumule, radicle, coleoptile, coleorhiza, epicotyle and hypocotyle. Whenever we draw the structure of embryo, these are the few terms to be remembered. Okay, so this is the structure of a typical monocot seed. Okay. So this is the actual structure of a typical monocot seed. I hope this part of the chapter is very much clear to you. Seeds are nothing but fertilized ovule. Seed has three important parts: seed coat, cotyledons and embryonal axis. Seed could be classified into two types based on whether they have residual endosperm or not. If they have residual endosperm, they are known as albuminous seed. If they don't have residual endosperm, we call them as non-albuminous seed. Seed, when they are they are growing, when they are maturing, they loses the water content and becomes they are reduced in their weight. Okay, and the seed coat is formed from the integuments, which is the outermost two protective layers of a ovule. And the micropyle becomes a small pore in the seed coat. It allows the entry of oxygen and water inside the ovule. Now, in few seeds, the nucellar tissue will be, the remnants of nucellus will be seen inside a seed. Such type of condition is known as perisperm. If the nucellus is remaining inside the seed, that part is called as perisperm. Then, if we look into the structure of a monocotyledonous seed, we have a seed coat, we have cotyledon, and we have an embryonal axis. In embryonal axis, we have both plumule and radicle, and we have this coleoptile and coleorhiza. We have some few leaf primordia here. This is the structure of a typical seed. Students, the last topic that we would be studying under post-fertilization events is fruit formation. Till now we have studied how endosperm is formed from primary endosperm cell, how embryo is formed from a zygote, how seed is formed from an ovule. Okay. As a last topic, as a last post-fertilization event, we will be studying fruit formation, how fruit is formed. Okay. In my previous classes, I have explained you that fruit is formed from the bottom large part of a pistil, which is known as ovary. So this is the whole pistil. This part is known as stigma. This is style, and this is ovary. Okay. Since we are concerned about only fruit formation, I am not going to explain about any other structures here. We will only look into this pistil part. Pistil, also stigma and style, their job is done when the pollination is done. Now the only part left here is the ovary. Okay. Once the fertilization is done, what happens is the whole ovary part, this develops into a fruit. The whole ovary develops into a fruit. Here you see this wall of the ovary. Okay, inside this you will find the ovule. Okay, embryo sac, here the zygote is developed, the whole ovule will be converted into seed. Now, this whole ovary is converted into fruit. The ovary wall, this is the wall of the ovary, this develops into wall of fruit, which is known as pericarp. This is an important question. For 1 mark, they will ask you what is a pericarp. You have to write, this is the wall of fruit, or the outermost layer of a fruit is known as pericarp, which is obtained from the wall of ovary. Ovary wall gives rise to this wall of the fruit, which is known as pericarp. The outermost part of the fruit that you touch is the wall of the fruit, or it is known as pericarp. A fruit could be of two types, either fleshy or it could be dry. Okay, you will find the fruit in two conditions. Fleshy, as you all know, in the case of your guava, mango, orange, all these are fleshy fruits. And if we have to talk about the fruit could be of two types, either fleshy or dry. Okay, fleshy fruits are, the fruit which you feel as fleshy, like for example, guava, your orange, mango, and so many. Okay, dry fruits are the fruits which you find it very dry. For example, is your groundnut, mustard. Okay, the fruit that you get in mustard plants. Okay, they are also very dry. Now, here one thing I want to clarify. The diagram here itself says this ovule, the whole part is ovule. They develop into seeds. The whole ovary, it develops into a fruit. Okay, so the seed which is obtained from this ovule, this will be present inside the fruit, because the whole fruit will, the whole ovary will develop into a fruit, and the ovule will develop into a seed. Ovule will always be found inside a fruit. Okay, the seed will always be found inside a fruit. Now, the formation of this ovule to seed and ovary to fruit takes place simultaneously. Okay, when the conversion of ovule into seed and the conversion of the ovary into this fruit takes place simultaneously. They do not wait. Okay, they take place simultaneously. Now, the next concept that you have to know about fruit is that there are different types of fruits. There are different types of fruits. Few fruits are known as true fruits. When I say true fruits, if a fruit is developed only from this ovary, okay, if the fruit has developed only from this ovary part, then those fruits are known as true fruits. Only the ovary part of the flower gives rise to fruit, then the fruit can be called as true fruits. There are certain fruits which can also be called as false fruits. Okay, what are false fruits? False fruits are those fruits in which you see this part of the flower. While explaining the structure of a bisexual flower, I have mentioned that this broad tip of the pedicel, this is pedicel. Pedicel will lead into a broad region known as thalamus. This is pedicel. Pedicel will lead into a broad tip known as thalamus, this region. Attached to this region you will find your pistil, the stamen, the petals, the sepals, all the structure, all the four whorls which I have explained in the first class of a flower is attached to this broad region known as thalamus. Sometimes what happens is when this ovary part is developing into a fruit, this thalamus region also helps in the fruit formation. Sometimes when fruit is forming along with the ovary, this thalamus region also helps in fruit formation. The fruit formed as a result of this thalamus and ovary are known as false fruits, because they are not the actual complete fruit obtained only from the ovary. Thalamus is also helping in the formation of fruit. Okay, so in such case where ovary is helped also by thalamus in fruit formation, such fruits are called as false fruits. Okay. Then there are certain other type of fruits known as parthenocarpic fruits. Parthenocarpic fruits you must have studied in your previous classes. If a fruit is formed without fertilization, okay, if a fruit is formed, you can imagine the whole structure of fertilization I have explained throughout my classes. I have explained how fertilization takes place, how pollination takes place, all those things. Okay, imagine a fruit is formed from this ovary without any fertilization happening inside the embryo sac. Okay, as at such time, the fruit formed are known as parthenocarpic fruits. The fruits formed without fertilization. The fruit formed without fertilization is known as parthenocarpic fruits. In this fruit, we will not find seeds. Okay, these seeds, fruits are formed without seeds. So these fruits are also known as seedless fruits. Nowadays, parthenocarpic fruits are produced artificially with the help of hormones. Okay, by inducing a hormonal action, the ovaries are induced to develop into fruit without undergoing fertilization. Okay, you will not find seeds inside these particular fruits. They are known as parthenocarpic fruits. The name itself indicates carpic. That means it is formed directly from the carpels. Okay, make sure you don't get confused with the terms parthenocarpic and parthenogenesis. Both are different terms. Parthenocarpic always refers to fruits or plant, because the word carpic refers to carpel, which is another name for this pistil. Okay, this is the information about fruits. Let's move on to the last topic of the chapter, which is apomixis and polyembryony. Here I'll give you a few examples for the fruits, for a few examples of false fruits. Example, your apple, strawberry, cashews are the examples for false fruits, and true fruits you can take any example of the fruits that you eat regularly, like mango, orange, guava. Okay, so they are the examples of false fruits. Now let's move on to the last topic of this chapter, which is apomixis and polyembryony. Let's begin with this topic, apomixis. Now, we all know that once the fertilization is done inside an embryo sac, where a male gamete fuses with the female gamete, which is egg, zygote is formed. Once the zygote is formed, the zygote develops into embryo, and the ovule, which is surrounding to this embryo, they develop into seed. Only after the fertilization is done inside the embryo sac, the ovule gets converted into seed. However, in few plants belonging to Asteraceae family, what happens is the seeds are formed without fertilization. Okay, I have explained the process of how the seeds are formed after the fertilization is done inside the embryo sac. However, imagine a case where a seed is formed without fertilization. Such process is known as apomixis. When a seed is formed with fertilization, such seeds are known as, this process is known as apomixis, and such seeds are known as apomictic seeds. Okay, the seeds resulted the seeds formed as a result of no fertilization are known as apomictic seeds. What might be the reason for this apomixis? The one important reason for the apomixis is, you all know that inside the embryo sac, inside this ovule, we will have this cell which is known as egg, which is actually a female gamete. Okay, this is a female gamete. Female gamete is generally expected to be haploid in nature, because when this fuses with the male gamete, which is also haploid, this results into the formation of a zygote, which is diploid in nature. Okay, however, imagine there was some mistake happened in the meiotic division, which was happening during the formation of these female gametes, and the female gamete, instead of becoming a haploid cell, it has remained as a diploid cell. Okay, the female gamete has retained itself as a diploid cell. Now what happens is, the egg will not wait for the male gamete to come and fertilize it. The female gamete directly develops into an embryo. As the female gamete develops into an embryo, immediately the surrounding ovule develops into a seed. When the female gamete has not undergone fertilization by a male gamete, the female gamete directly developed into an embryo. It is not waiting for the male gamete. Since it is diploid, it directly develops into embryo. When the female gamete develops into embryo, the surrounding ovule starts developing into a seed. Now, the seed which is formed as a result of no fertilization, or the seeds that are formed without fertilization, are known as apomixis. Now you know the condition of apomixis. Now, apomixis is of much economical importance. Economic importance, as we can say. How apomixis is important economically? What economic importance it has? Apomixis is a very important process now encouraged in the field of hybridization experiments. Okay, especially in the plant breeding techniques. In the crop improvement techniques, crop improvement programs, they are using this process known as apomixis. As you all know, in this process, there is no fertilization. There is no male gamete coming and fertilizing the egg. So the female retains its own property, retains all its genetic material without getting combined with the properties of the male gamete. It directly develops into the embryo. So this embryo, when it develops into a new plant, it will retain all the characteristics of its mother plant. Okay, so this technique or this concept has been utilized in the hybridization experiments where they breed plants to get hybrid plants. Okay, now when plant 1 is bred with plant 2, or when you carry out hybridization experiment for any characters, you take character 1 from this plant and you want character 2 from this plant, you breed these two plants, ultimately you will get a hybrid. Okay, you grow this hybrid will become a larger plant. This plant will have characters from both C1 and C2. That means the hybrid plant will have characters, your desired character, the characters due to which you are crossing these two plants, those characters will be seen in this hybrid. However, when this hybrid plants, they will have the desired characters. When they undergo pollination, fertilization, everything, when they ultimately produce the seed. When you have crossed two plants, you got the hybrid. Okay, this hybrid plants have the characters that you are desiring for. However, when these hybrid plants produce seed, it may not have the same characteristics as that of the hybrid. It may go back to its parental characteristics. Okay, I hope you are able to understand. When you are crossing two plants for a hybrid, your experiment is successful. The hybrid plant that you have obtained has characters from both the parents. Okay, it is a hybrid. It has desirable characters that you like. However, when these hybrid plants again they produce seed, the plant obtained from these seeds, the seed definitely is going to germinate and it is going to produce a future plant. This plant will not have the same characteristics as that of the hybrid plant. It might go back to its parental characteristics or the characteristics of the plant with which this hybrid plant is bred. Okay, now the plant with which the hybrid plant is bred. Now in this case, if a farmer has grown a hybrid plant in one generation, if he is not getting the seed with desired characters in the next generation, again he has to go back and do the crossing experiments, breeding experiments, hybridization experiments, and he has to get new hybrid plants. Again he has to start with the cropping. This case is not good. This condition is not actually good because the farmer has to lose a lot of money. Okay, and getting a hybrid plant is not less expensive. It includes a lot of manpower, it includes a lot of money. Okay, that is the reason in hybridization experiment what they thought is, if these hybrid plants are not bred with any other plants, if these hybrid plants are made to undergo this apomixis. Imagine there is plant 1 and plant 2 are bred and you have got a hybrid. Now you are not allowing these hybrid plants to undergo any more breeding. Instead, you make these hybrid plant to carry out this process called as apomixis. That means the ovule or in the hybrid plant, inside the ovule, inside the embryo sac, there is an egg. This egg is not allowed to get combined with any other male gamete from any other plant, whereas this egg is made diploid and allowed to undergo the formation of embryo. At that particular time, there is no combination of a new character, okay, and the desirable character of the parent plant is obtained as such, okay, and that is the reason when you get, after apomixis, when you get the next plant or when you get the seed, this seed has exactly the same characteristics as that of hybrid. Hope you are able to understand. When this hybrid plant is not breeding with any other plant, it is allowed to undergo apomixis. All the characters of the egg or the female gamete remains the same. When it forms embryo, when it develops into a new plant, okay, when the seed is formed, when the seeds are sown and you get new plants, the plant is exactly as same as hybrid, okay, because there is no interbreeding, okay, or there is no cross pollination or anything happening. The hybrid plant's character will be directly transferred to the seed. In this case, the farmers can make use of the seeds obtained from this hybrid seed to carry out their future agricultural needs. Okay, so this is the importance of apomixis. They are of much economic importance. A lot of research is going on this apomixis nowadays. After knowing that this hybridization experiment field can be benefited by this apomixis. Now let's look into the last topic of our chapter, which is polyembryony. Polyembryony, name itself suggests many embryos. Okay, now you have a embryo sac. Okay, this is the ovule. This is the embryo sac. Surrounding to this embryo sac, we have a tissue known as nucellus. Okay. There are multiple nucellar cells surrounding to the embryo sac. Now, here you have your zygote, okay, which is going to develop into embryo. Okay, you have this zygote which is going to develop into embryo. What happens is, when the zygote is going to give rise to embryo, in few plants what happens is, these nucellar cells, few cells from this nucellus tissue, what they do is, I will erase this antipodals, few nucellar cells which are surrounding this embryo sac, they enter the embryo sac. Few nucellar cells from the surrounding of this embryo sac enter this embryo sac, and each of them, they give rise to a new embryo. So now imagine, inside one embryo sac, or inside, forget about the embryo sac, we will consider this ovule which is going to develop into seed. Inside every seed, instead of one embryo, you have multiple embryos. These embryos are developed from the nucellar cells which are surrounding to the embryo sac, which move inside the embryo sac, and independently they develop as a new embryo. Nucellar cells, they are obviously they are diploid. Okay, they are diploid, they are not haploid because they have not undergone any kind of reductional division. They are diploid. Since they are diploid, they enter the embryo sac and they develop into individual embryos. So inside one ovule or inside one seed, you will be able to find many embryos. Inside one seed, you will find multiple or polyembryos. This condition is known as polyembryony. This is the special cases in few plants. So with this we are ending this apomixis and polyembryony topic. Also we are ending the chapter known as sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Now I hope the whole chapter is clear to you. In this chapter we have studied structure of a bisexual flower. Okay, under structure of a bisexual flower we have studied 4 whorls which will be present inside a flower: calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. We have studied pre-fertilization events, fertilization events, post-fertilization events. In pre-fertilization events we have studied the structure of anther. We have studied the process of microsporogenesis. Then we have studied what is the structure of pollen grain. Okay, we have studied the structure of ovary. Okay, we have studied the structure of ovule. We have studied how megasporogenesis happens inside the ovule. Okay, after that, this is pre-fertilization. Then we studied about fertilization events. Under this we have studied double fertilization, which is nothing but syngamy and triple fusion. Then we have studied about post-fertilization events, which includes endosperm formation, embryo formation, fruit formation and seed formation. As a last topic we have studied apomixis and polyembryony. If I have missed any points, I will try to cover it in my next class. I'm sure I have not missed any point in the whole chapter. If we have missed anything, we can discuss when we come to the regular classroom sessions. Okay, and if you have any confusion or if you need any clarification in this whole chapter, you can always come back to me, or you can always reach out to me. Okay, hope the whole chapter and this session was helpful. I hope all of you have concentrated and listened to the classes without missing even a single class. And if you have missed any part, you can always request the management and they will post the videos again, so that you complete the whole chapter without missing even a single part. Okay students, thank you.